Hi there, welcome to the latest episode of my 10-minute rant. This one will be more than 10 minutes, I'd imagine, because of the amount of information I need to get through. And the topic of this 10, probably 20-minute rant is evidence I have that shows quite clearly that Humza Yousaf, the First Minister of Scotland, was determined to ride roughshod over procedure and law to make sure that £250,000 of the total £750,000 given to Gaza went to the UNRWA. I will prove that Humza contradicted ministerial advice and indeed a ministerial decision to give a lesser amount of money to a totally different charity. I will also show you that the money was taken from a source that it had no right to come from, and the Scottish Government are now trying to cover that up by suggesting it came from another source. I will also highlight the amazing coincidence of the timeline of this money being taken from one charity and given to another by Humza against the advice of ministers and specialists 48 hours before his in-laws were released from Gaza under the watchful eye of the charity that he dictated this money went to. Now, there will be some information I'm going to share which is complicated. I will try my utmost to simplify and make it as easy to understand for all, because this, ladies and gentlemen, is massive. This is corruption of the highest order. This is gerrymandering of Olympic levels. This is Humza Yousaf using the Scottish purse for his own ends. Now, the story goes back to the Scottish Government issuing two amounts of money to Gaza and the press releases that they put out. And in one of those press releases, we also at the same time donated money to Libya for the flood disaster there. So in the one press release, we had two announcements. And in the Libyan announcement, we learned three facts from the press release. How much money, where it came from, in terms of the funds from the Scottish Government, and where it went to. You would imagine this information, it would be normal to have in a press release. But in the same press release, the Gaza money only indicated two bits of information: the amount and where it was going. There was zero notice given to which fund this money came from. My spidey senses went up immediately. This was over a month ago. I've been working on this story for over a month. I obtained a freedom of information from a third party at that time, which showed quite clearly where the money came from. It came from the IDF, the International Development Fund. I've done a previous video, I'll put a link to it up here, where I blew that out the water. Given to Gaza, nor the UNRWA was possible through the IDF. That is why a few days later, and approximately a month ago, I asked for my own freedom of information from the Scottish Government. And I asked them simply for two pieces of information. I asked them to give me all correspondence in the decision-making process that allowed these donations to go through, and justification of how they felt the IDF was a suitable source for the funds. The Freedom of Information response I got last night at the close of business, but was not made aware of until about 11 o'clock last night due to me being away from home and having issues, flat tyres with my car, coming home from Perth. It was about 11 PM before I had eyes on my response, and it is shocking. The first thing I noticed was in the covering letter, the redactions. And there was three types of redactions from my inquiry. The first one, perfectly normal. It said it would redact information that could highlight civil servants, etc. their own personal details. I fully understand that. The second and third reasons for redaction were most peculiar. I'll share them with you on the screen. But the most worrying aspect of the redaction was the bit that claims it could affect relationships between Holyrood and Westminster. Thereby, the information I requested must have had some really delicate stuff discussing foreign affairs, and that would strain the relationship with the United Kingdom, who have the reserved powers of foreign policy, and the Parliament in Holyrood, which has no powers of foreign policy. I think it would be prudent for those with higher access levels than me as a mere civilian should look into those redactions, because there's something not right. So now to get on to the story and the nitty-gritty of the information that came by Freedom of Information. Prior to the 24th of October, the First Minister was in discussions with ministers to give between £100,000 and £200,000 to Gaza for water. And at that time, UNICEF were doing a WASH programme, which is basically for environmental fresh water and things like that. And they were looking for funds. And the First Minister suggested that this, getting more money to Gaza due to the water, and this is key that you remember these details for later on, was the excuse, the reason for a second and further amount of money. And at that time was requesting either £100,000 or £200,000. Now, between the 24th and the 26th of October, I have 3 documents from the Department of External Affairs. Each of them giving 3 options for how this money could be given to Gaza, and how it would get there, who would receive it. And in each occasion, the Department of External Affairs recommend a redacted offer, so I can't see exactly how they were doing it, but an offer and an option which would have seen the money go to UNICEF for their current fundraisers they were doing to improve the water supply into Gaza. That would seem logical. So in 3 instances, and on the 3rd instance, the document shows that ministers in Scotland had already agreed to give £200,000 to UNICEF for water. However, on the 20... Let me just get my notes here, I don't want to misquote anything. On the 30th of October, I have an email which shows the First Minister of Scotland saying that if he's going to be meeting the UNRWA, we'll just announce a £250,000 extra to them, and this will need to be a budget pressure we carry forward. So on the 30th of October, he decided it was £250,000. We're just going to announce it because I'm meeting the UNRWA soon. At this point, we don't know the date, but that shows up in later correspondence. And it doesn't really matter. We'll just need to carry forward this obligation. So meaning, we'll just give them the money. We'll worry about how we justify it later. That is an email from the First Minister of Scotland before any decision has been made, unknown to us at this point. As it turns out, the decision had already been made and agreed by ministers previous to the 30th of October that they would give £200,000 to UNICEF. On the 1st of November, on the 31st of October, the day after, the First Minister writes an email saying, I'm just going to give £250 to the UNRWA. On the 31st of October, despite previous emails from the Department of External Affairs saying that they recommend that ministers should give money to UNICEF for Gaza, suddenly they reverse that. And what they tell us on the 31st of the 10th, despite these two three previous, they suddenly say and agree that the 250,000 to the UN RWA was suitable. Right up until the day before this, they were sending out emails saying that £200,000 should go to UNICEF and get to Gaza. On 3 occasions, they recommended ministers, and on this email, they also suggest that the ministers had already agreed on a £200,000 donation to UNICEF. But intervention by the First Minister suddenly has them recommending that that's all right, and totally forgetting their recommendations and an agreement from ministers previously to give the money, a lesser amount, to UNICEF. Then, on the 2nd of November, in Edinburgh, Humza Yousaf met leaders from the UN RWA. And guess what happened the following day? The following day, Humza's in-laws, mother-in-law and father-in-law, both get safe passage out of Gaza, escorted by the UNRWA. So, there we have it. In summary, the Scottish Government were asked to make a £200,000 donation to UNICEF to help out the issue with fresh water in Gaza. That was recommended by the Department, the Foreign Department. They said out the 3 options that the ministers should vote for the option giving the money to UNICEF. That indeed, with the documentation I've just made public, was actually agreed by the ministers. And for some reason, Humza Yousaf got himself involved, managed to get everybody to turn full 180, and give the money to the UN RWA. Quite clearly shown in the evidence I've provided that that was at the notion of the First Minister, going completely against the advice from his ministers, going completely against the decision previously made by his ministers. And he was able to dictate the day before the decision turned 180 degrees that we would just give £250,000 to UNWRA because I'm meeting them this week. Not £200, not to UNICEF, not for water. And in the final announcement, it was unrestricted. They could use that money for whatever they want. Throughout the whole process, it was all about water, up until the 11th hour, when Humza went against all recommendations and decisions. It was certainly not about water, it was unrestricted, and it was to a charity later found out to have had to sack some of their staff because they were involved in the invasion of Israel on the 7th of October. And subsequent to that, we found out that Hamas were tunnelled under UNWRA headquarters with tunnels below such places, housing their officers in planning. Their intelligence office was below a UNWRA headquarters. Now, since then, most of the Western world have said, we might stop giving them money. And Humza has come out and told the world in a tweet that I've previously highlighted that this is only a short-term thing. Scotland have not decided to stop giving them money. We just don't have any just now. But as soon as we've got some more, you can have it. This is ridiculous. I cannot sit here and cast iron give you guarantees that that money was used as a ransom to free 2 people out of the country. I couldn't do that. It's impossible for me to do that. However, the chain of events, the timeline, look at the facts and make your own mind up. I would strongly suggest, if they're not already doing so, intelligence forces had a look into this. I've got all the documentation there. I am willing to share them with any journalist, any members of parliament, any legal body, but from police all the way up. I have no problem giving this evidence and turning it over for the right purpose. This is a scandal. This is horrific. This is a complete roughshod over democracy and how things are supposed to work. The other peculiar thing is this source of funds, because I have documented proof from an FOI telling me that the money came from the IDF fund. I then have conflicting information from the Scottish Government through an FOI request that I received last night, telling me the money came from the WEF. Now, neither of those sources are possible because Gaza and UNRWA do not qualify for any money from the IDF. And the WEF fund, which could possibly be used for such humanitarian purposes, had all been used that year. There was no money left in it. This is horrific. This is Humza Yousaf using his position for his own benefit. Now, that's regardless if there was a knock-on effect to the release of his in-laws. He decided he wanted to give £250,000 to the UNRWA despite no source of funds being available for that purpose, and despite ministerial advice to give the money to UNICEF, and despite ministers already agreeing to give the money to UNICEF. Humza Yousaf managed to get them all to turn 180 degrees and give the money to the place he wanted. I find that disgusting. Absolutely disgusting. That one man would utilise his power. And if there's no other suggestions or proof of, is it malfeasance you call it? Surely this is the most open and shut case of it known in the Scottish Government. It's horrific. This video needs to be shared. This video needs to be shared. I never ask people to share my videos. I just ask them to give me thumbs up and all that. This video, the content must be shared. It must be shared high, far and wide. I would respectfully request everybody who's ever watched a video that I like and quite liked anything I've ever done in my life, do me a big favour, share this far and wide, share it all over WhatsApp, all over social media, and with as many people in high places as you can think of, because this is disgusting. It's horrific. Thanks very much for watching this far. Everybody apart from Humza Yousaf, have a great day. Cheery bye now.